Karen suddenly pulled out her phone and called 911. She claimed I was causing trouble in the neighborhood. I simply stood there, wondering why she was so angry. I had no idea she had just made a very expensive mistake. A few minutes later, 2 officers arrived at my driveway. Karen immediately rushed toward them with her version of the story. She pointed at me as if she had already decided I was guilty. The officers listened carefully before saying a word. Karen demanded that the officers arrest me immediately. She insisted I had violated HOA rules and caused a disturbance. I didn't argue or raise my voice. I simply asked the officers if they wanted to hear my side. I explained that I had been washing my own vehicle on my own driveway. Nothing was blocking the street, and nobody was in danger. Karen simply didn't like the water reaching the edge of her property. The officers began looking at the situation very differently. Karen pulled out a copy of an HOA rule she believed proved her case. She proudly showed it to the officers. But there was one problem with her argument. That rule didn't give the HOA the authority she thought it did. One officer looked at Karen and asked a simple question. "Do you own the property where this happened?" Karen hesitated before answering. That tiny pause changed the entire conversation. Then one of the officers noticed something inside my garage. Old firefighter equipment and a framed photograph of my years of service were visible. The officer recognized the apartment immediately. Karen suddenly realized she might not know who she had called the police on. The officer suddenly recognized my name. He realized I had served the community for decades as a professional firefighter. He asked about my retirement, and I answered calmly. Karen stood there wondering why the conversation had completely changed. Then I showed them the property documents. The driveway and the area Karen was complaining about were clearly my property. The officers carefully checked the information. Karen's complaint was beginning to fall apart piece by piece. Karen had called 911 expecting the officers to take her side. Instead, they discovered that I had done nothing wrong. Her own complaint had brought the facts into the open, and the real consequences of her decision were just beginning. The officers explained that there was no reason to arrest me. Karen's complaint had turned into a simple property dispute, but she wasn't ready to accept that answer. She insisted there had to be something they could do. Karen kept insisting that I was violating HOA rules. The officer reminded her that HOA rules did not automatically make something a crime. She became visibly frustrated. Her plan to have me arrested was falling apart right in front of her. I told the officers I had spent most of my life serving this community. I had responded to fires, rescued families, and helped people on their worst days. I never expected a simple garden hose to create this much drama. The officer smiled and understood exactly what I meant. The officer finally told Karen that I had committed no crime. He explained that an HOA disagreement should not automatically become a police matter. Karen stared at him as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then she made another claim. Karen claimed I had intentionally sprayed water onto her property. I pointed out that the hose had never crossed my driveway. The officers looked at the ground and checked the property line. Once again, the facts were on my side. The officers carefully examined where the water had actually gone. Everything was contained on my side of the property line. Karen's accusation had no evidence behind it. She was running out of excuses. The officers told Karen they couldn't arrest someone simply because she disliked his actions. They advised her to handle HOA disagreements through the proper civil process. Karen's face turned red with frustration. Her 911 call had accomplished the exact opposite of what she wanted. Before leaving, the officers thanked me for cooperating. They told me everything was settled from their perspective. I shook their hands and thanked them for doing their job. Karen stood silently nearby, clearly unhappy with the outcome. I went right back to washing my vehicle. The entire neighborhood had watched Karen's plan collapse. She had called the police expecting me to be humiliated. Instead, she had exposed how far she was willing to go over a neighborhood disagreement. That day taught everyone an important lesson about consequences. Being on an HOA board doesn't give anyone unlimited power, and calling 911 over a petty disagreement can backfire badly. Karen wanted an arrest. What she got was a lesson she wouldn't forget.